to our next panel, which is blockchain games. We'll be switching over here in the next minute, and we'll get everybody on and move on. I'm going to go through the bios as people join. For the blockchain games, future blockchain games, we have Orion, who's joining us.
Hello. Yes.
Ryan is a crypto investor and also involved with putting on the Web3 web conference. We also have Serge, who's joining, former gambler, former poker player, former lawyer, cryptocurrency investor from a long time ago, and made it big in 2017 and is now here to give some thoughts. And also Ryan as well. But Ryan, do you mind introducing yourself, because I don't have your bio?
I think you're, did you say Ryan or Orion?
Ryan.
Okay, me. Yeah, I'm an analyst, been in blockchain for a while, and relating to games, I've designed a few games in the past, and I'm currently designing one for blockchain. So hopefully that'll be something to look out for.
Well, why don't we start with you then? And Ryan, I'd like to get your argument about why I should care about blockchain games and why they're going to be a big thing.
So blockchain games are going to be really big, in my opinion, because there's just so much you can do that you couldn't do before. So think about, this will be a while out, this example I'm going to give you, mind you. We're a bit from being actually able to execute this, but something like, say you're playing an MMO, right? And you start the MMO with your dinky little training sword, okay? And you then kill 100 of this specific monster, and that makes that dinky little trading sword get some permanent stat buff, okay? You out-level this sword, and then you sell that sword. Another new player comes along and buys this new training sword that you had that has your buff, and then they use that, right? And they kill 100 of X monster that gives it a permanent buff. So on and so forth, continuing until, maybe 10, 20, 30 players down the line, this sword is now some huge, humongous, like amazing weapon that it wasn't able to really be before, because in the way we currently track in-game items and things like MMOs, it's not a kind of unique kind of identifier where, X person owned this for X amount of time and killed X amount of monsters with it. We could track those maybe with a current database, but it'd just be so much to track. When with blockchain, you can just have a single NFT that is just constantly tracking that, rather than having to do this convoluted database that just goes through all of these things and tries to, replicate how we could trade NFTs, which is really simple. You're muted, Samuel.
So Serge or Ryan, you want to also make the case about blockchain games, whether you're bullish or bearish on them?
I'll go first. So I'm bullish on blockchain games, pretty much just because it's one of the things with the least friction to adoption. Games are digital; they exist in the digital world, and gamers have always been used to fake money. So unlike big corporations and governments, getting them used to the idea of fake money and making that connect between a physical item, a physical thing that they're worried about, and then the digital NFT or, the digital representation on the blockchain is more difficult in the traditional, government and corporation world. But in the gaming world, it's all, what they care about is all they digital. So it's a lot easier to start, implementing blockchain where it can and should be implemented.
I'm also relatively bullish on blockchain games. I think it's one of the places where there's an immediate use case, just like a couple of others. I am, unfortunately, bearish on the current generation of blockchain games. A lot of people seem to have gotten the idea that what you need to do when you design a game is you pick an exactly identical game from a few years ago, you clone it, and then you add blockchain, and then you have a workable game because you can buy and sell items. And the interesting thing about that is how this was tried. Exactly, this was tried back in Diablo III. And Blizzard spent a lot of money creating a real money auction house, promoting it, doing everything possible with it, and then it came out and everyone hated it, without exception. I happen to be one of the people in the world that probably made the most money from the real money auction house, and I hated it. It was a good way to make some spare change, but it was a terrible piece of game design because what they did was throw out collectibles without really any idea of how to balance the game around that or how to create a fun game with that as a centerpiece. I think the next step, both for blockchain gaming in general and actually for auction house enabled games in particular, is going to be to create a fun game and then attach the auction house as a feature to that game. I don't think the correct answer is to start from, well, we're going to buy and sell items and then we'll make a game that's built around this. We've tried that and I don't think the results have been compelling.
Yeah, so with Diablo 3, I was going to bring that up as well too. You took a really amazing and fun game and then you turned it into an auction house simulator. And I don't think people like that at all.
Can I kind of expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Ryan.
So Diablo 3 in particular was a kind of a single-player loot-based game for anyone who doesn't know. Basically, it's the same gameplay cycle over and over and over again, hoping to get this very small % loot drop that has a higher stat than an item you already have. What Blizzard did was they took a real money auction house and basically said, if you have the money, you can just buy your way straight into the best items instead of actually playing the game. That was an absolutely terrible way to go about it. As Serge said, everyone absolutely hated it without fail. And I also completely agree with him. The focus should be making a fun game that incorporates blockchain, not, hey, we're going to make a blockchain game or we're going to make money off of it because we're going to sell items and stuff like that. You definitely need to actually have a core gameplay loop there that is compelling for the end user to even get them interested in wanting to use the actual properties of the blockchain that you might incorporate.
So do you think it'd be better to have a game where you can acquire collectibles and own them as NFTs, but not be able to trade them? So
No. I mean, that's something you could do in the future. I mean, there could be games based around getting an NFT that's rare on the blockchain, right? But I think one of the core things of blockchain is that you can trade them with other people and buy and sell them. I think that most blockchain games will incorporate this. But my issue with the previous example, right, was Diablo is specifically a single player game that was then turned into a kind of semi-multiplayer game that then basically said, hey, you don't have to play the game to actually own the best tier of item, which was a very, very far departure from the previous entry in the series.
So that's an interesting thing to bring up, right? Diablo 3 was, you're absolutely right, it was a single player game that had a multiplayer component kind of patched into it, along with the ability to bypass the loot generation, which was the entirety of the game almost.
Exactly.
But then how do you do that correctly, right? Because the other examples to get into the weeds a little bit, you have kind of the same problems with a lot of things. Hearthstone is partly, it's a fun card game built around a collection of cards that at first glance would make a very good blockchain loop, but we already have Hearthstone. To reproduce Hearthstone now, you have to be better than Hearthstone, and so much better that the several tens of millions of players are willing to dump their card collections in Hearthstone to go do this. And the idea that they'll do that as soon as you promise that 10% of them will make money off selling their cards, that's a tough sell. It's a very tough sell. Same with some other game genres, like you can't just make an FPS game and throw blockchain into it. The obvious thing to do there is to monetize wins and losses. Well, okay, you've monetized it in a way that 97% will lose money.
That is a terrible way to go about it.
Yeah.
And also, when you start monetizing, the outcomes, then doesn't that start getting into the gambling territory? And then 14-year-old kids aren't legally supposed to gamble.
But absolutely, and I'm not mentioning that because Blizzard seems to have not mentioned it when they did the auction house. But it's yes, it's more of the same thing. And even worse, right? Like the number one point you have to understand as a game designer is you have to make a game that rewards winning more than it punishes losing. Because one of the key aspects of human psychology is people value wins less than they hate losses. This is something that's true across all human fields. That's why slot machines reward winning so much visibly, because they serve to take away the pain of a loss. So in games, when you start monetizing the game, when you start doing these buy and sell collectibles inside a game, it's very important that almost everyone who plays it feels that they're a winner, which is impossible to do when you have real money options. And that's a problem that's going to have to be solved by some very smart game designers, which will take a while. I don't think this is instant either.
And especially well, yeah, go ahead. I mean, and especially if there's one-of-a-kind items which are like verified by the blockchain that either are pay to win, that's necessary to acquire those items, or there's some sort of professional scene where you have to spend money to get those items, those highly rare items, or you can't compete professionally. I mean, it'd be strange if you couldn't do that. I mean, one of the things about, CSGO or Fortnite or, Hearthstone is that, well, we'll leave Hearthstone alone for a second, but, in most FPSs, you can just open it up and play immediately, and, everything's pretty level. It's just more about the skill of the player. In Hearthstone, with enough money, you can acquire pretty much every single card in the game that everybody else has. And, if you're lucky, then you'll get some goldens. But if you like for a certain few blockchain games that I know that are doing cards, they're releasing special edition cards that are only available during the initial funding period. And after that, they'll no longer be available. And they're quite very powerful cards. And who's to say that they're game breaking? And who's to say that, if you want to become a professional player, you would have to acquire one of those? I mean, it's just strange.
I think this entire argument that you guys are talking about is entirely preceded by the fact that the game has to have a satisfying gameplay loop to begin with. If you're just slapping something on there and being like, our main objective is we're going to be able to resell these collectibles, then you're already failing. That game is already gone. What should be happening is I'm creating a game that has a satisfying gameplay loop, right? And then I'm selling something to a player. And then once they have it, they can then send it to other players or resell it as they see fit. But I'm not explicitly telling them, hey, you should go and sell this card because it's going to be good or what have you, right? In relation to the aforementioned card games that are doing a model of where the current cards are being released and they're never going to be sold again. Again, that model, it fails out of the gate. You can't have that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of barriers in place. I mean, as a future parent, I really would be slightly worried if my kid was involved in real money trading, if they're under the age of 18. Yeah, it's decentralized. I mean, you can't stop it. The game developers have to institute KYC, right?
I'll preface this by if you played card games as a kid, which I did, opening a Yu-Gi-Oh pack and then going and wheeling and dealing the cards that you got out of a box of cards. Most parents would probably be mortified with the amount of money transactions I was doing at 10 to 12 years old with just these cardboard Yu-Gi-Oh cards, but it is what it is.
Yeah. There was one notorious crypto guy who will not be named who made a fortune from selling gold in the old game days before he got into crypto.
Oh yeah, World of Warcraft gold. Yeah.
Yeah. Made a fortune doing that, and kids still desperate for that gold. They paid real money.
So we're going to take a question from Barry, who wanted to ask, do we see a business in renting out one's characters or gear by using NFTs in the blockchain?
In an MMO in the future, say a VR MMO, I could definitely see that happening. Specifically if there's a kind of competitive component where, say, the actual competition can change between games. Say one one match will be held on like a water stage, and you need a character that has a water proficiency gear, or a very hot stage where they need like heat protection gear. And you, as a normal player, might not have all that gear by yourself, but you could say, go, hey, you have that gear. Can I borrow that for a game? And that might be a system that is implemented in the future, but in a traditional MMO setting, I don't particularly see that happening unless you're selling like the entire character.
We've had this happen before. World of Warcraft has had power leveling businesses built around it. We've had all sorts of stuff. Even going back to the original Ultima Online had businesses like that 25 years ago.
Right, but he's not saying power leveling. I thought he was saying like you can like loan out my character. Like you have access to my high level character, and then you get to use all of their traits for a specified amount of time. Not I'm going to pay you to make a character that's as good as yours.
There have been some similar things. Like it's not exactly the same, but even in games like EverQuest, we're talking ancient history here, but we've had the ability to have another character come in and help you on a raid. Not everyone had friends. There were businesses built around that kind of stuff.
Yeah. The closest I can think of in current MMOs is EVE Online. You can like pay Corpse to come and back you up in a firefight with their ships.
Yeah, I was a Gloomfleet director in EVE Online. That asked me about the ability to basically get money.
Yeah.
I think one thing we've been talking about, including blockchain in play to achieve sort of games, play to win, play to achieve. But one sort of genre that we haven't touched upon is something like Second Life or Sims, or a game where you're not creating an exact goal. I think something like Second Life might do well to implement this sort of paid blockchain asset.
So,
concept.
Like I said, a sort of VR MMO, like in the future, that's the example I used, would be perfect for this type of thing, where you could basically rent out your character to someone else to use for a while. But until we get to that point where VR MMOs are like actually used and widespread in the gaming community, which would be quite a ways away, I don't really see it being implemented.
I don't think you need I've never played it, but from what I understand, Second Life was, or is, I don't know if it's still around, pretty popular. And, do people pay real world money for stuff in that game?
Yes, they do. Yeah.
Yeah. So people perfectly willing to pay real world money already in a game and I remember the graphics weren't all that impressive, to pay real world money just to have stuff to play around with other people, without a specific goal. It's it's an open sort of system where they can come up with their own goal. It's just it's supposedly a mirror of the reality we have now, but there's really no objective. So I think that something like that is already right for implementing blockchain technology. Whether they need it or not, I'm not sure, but it's easier if you're not doing play to win.
So I'd like to come back to a lot of these secondary economies that we were talking about. Many of the things that have been mentioned, like power leveling in WoW, or gold farming in WoW, or what you were talking about in EverQuest, these are all secondary transactions that were taking place outside of the game itself. In that you would go to some website and you pay $10 and then you get some WoW gold a little bit later, and then you would see that these issues become such a prevalent issue, especially in like WoW, that they actually increased the amount of gold that people got so they could get rid of all these Chinese gold miners. I personally think that, and I'd like to guys get your opinion on this, is that there's very little reason for any AAA developer to work with any blockchain technology right now, from a like data protection standpoint, that they can already create in-game currency that you can pay for with a credit card and gets inserted into your game account, right? And then you can use it right there, and you don't actually have to have you're not relying on some sort of public blockchain. You're relying on your own internal private servers that you can push up or that you can adjust on your own. Additionally, I don't really see, I mean, you can probably change my mind on this, is that I don't really see a reason for companies to issue NFTs if they're already issuing it on their own private servers. Am I wrong here, or
So,
will AAA
Can I
companies?
take this one?
Yeah, sure. Anybody can.
So I think the main incentive I'm scared of is that these independent companies that don't have the capital that these major companies like Ubi or whatever have will start using NFTs in sort of ICO way to get funding, which they couldn't do before. I haven't seen that happen yet, but I'm thinking once regulation is more steady and in place, we might actually start seeing that come up.
So there are a few games that are already doing that. They're selling like in-game NFTs as a way to kind of bootstrap development. But I think the answer to the question that Samuel posed is that newer game companies will use kind of the blockchain like abilities as a way to market their game, right? So I don't think actually putting currency like WoW Gold or something on the blockchain is really a good idea, because that needs to be as immaterial as possible for actual gameplay reasons. But things like items should definitely be put on the blockchain for, say, an upcoming MMO or something, simply because of the very, very specific things that you can do on a blockchain that you can't easily do on a regular database. And I think you'll start seeing, if blockchain games become big, that you'll start seeing them move away from their competitors and like be like, hey, you can trade these items outside of the game. It creates this entire secondary market that's kind of like okay stamped by the developers, and you don't have to be scared that, say, Blizzard is going to come after you for selling your item on this, for giving your item to someone else, because it's actually like, this is okay, it's on the chain, what have you.
So I'm going to make two predictions, I think, about things that won't work, and one that I think might work. I think I completely agree that no AAA developer is going to go for this for a variety of reasons. Blizzard was the most likely. They tried, they failed, and it's never going to happen there again. That player base isn't crying out for the ability to trade, $100 worth of items from one place to another. If it's multiplayer, they can already do it, and if it's single player, no one cares. We've seen how that works in real life, and it's not something that anybody over there wants to track. And similarly, I think games centered around the idea of blockchain as a selling point, I think that also fits, because that gets us back into the idea that the ability to sell items is not the central point of the game. If it's the central point of the game, that's already too much good. It's not going anywhere. So what I think the sweet spot is a good game that has blockchain attached to it, but in a way that is invisible to the end user. I don't think the answer is, the mana token or any other kind of token. I don't think the answer is a lot of advertising that you own this card and you can trade this card if you want to, when 3 people can own a card out of a pool of 500,000. I think the answer is, well, it's some kind of game with a large amount of cosmetics and a large amount of item distribution, and then somewhere in the fine print, you'll find that this game requires 24/7 internet access, and there happens to be, an always stocked auction house. I don't know what that looks like. I think a lot of people are working in the back trying to figure that out.
I personally think that it won't be in regular gaming. It'll be more in the gambling sector when we talk about gaming, because the one thing that blockchain can provide, and by using smart contracts and public database or public protocols, is the ability to have provably fair gaming, where you can go back and you can see the odds of the game that you're playing, and you can understand that if you're making a bet, right? So you're an adult, you're not a child, so you're not marketing blockchain games to children, you're marketing blockchain games to adults. And adults can go back and they can check that the game that they were playing was provably fair, and they weren't being swindled by some company who had designed some malicious code to steal their crypto. Personally, where I think we're going to see the most growth over the next 3 to 5 years.
I can definitely see gambling taking on a big blockchain aspect, but I kind of vehemently disagree with you both here, that I think that there will be games that have blockchain incorporated in them that aren't advertising it, that will basically get a mass adoption by the people, primarily mobile gamers, I'm thinking, because the mobile games specifically, there's a lot of them that would really benefit from a kind of secondary economy, allowing players to interact that aren't specifically designed to do that right now. That I think that we'll see a market segment there that pops up, I think.
I think so. Somebody mentioned in Ryan, you mentioned this at the beginning as well too, but I really catch on until now, is that by having provenance, could add a lot more value to an item if it's with an NFT, and you can track that who it came from. You know, if
exactly.
You know, if you were given some sort of item from a pro player or you know, someone that was well known in the game, I mean, then it could have extra value that was added to it.
Like say you got the starter sword of someone who went on to be what is probably lauded as like the best player in that game, right? And you owned it, right? That would be an extremely valuable item that, while you could potentially track that already, most games aren't going to bother with. I think WoW is like the only big MMO that really tracks player history, and even then, I think it's kind of hard to actually get to for a like an individual standpoint. None of them really publish it, so something that's like constantly on the blockchain is constantly visible. That would be a really good advancement for MMOs in particular.
Another interesting idea I thought about a bit is this idea of making an asset cross game. Well, the people talk about that it's still pretty far away as making an asset cross game. You know, being able to recycle an asset from one game into another game by the same publisher.
Yeah, that's another thing that you'll probably see soon with just regular NFT collectibles. If a developer say they want to make a, I don't know, Clash of Clans type game in their universe, right? That'll be their first game that they put out. And then they'll make a Clash Royale version where if you have certain items in the previous game, you can like transfer them over to the Clash Royale version and use them there too. That seems like something that will definitely be implemented in upcoming blockchain games by the same developer. You won't see it cross-developer as much because there's just too much red tape in relation to that. But from the same developer, for sure, you'll definitely be seeing that soon.
Well, guys, let's get some quick comments from all of you. We'll wrap up, and it was a really good session, actually. So, Serge, why don't we start with you, get some final comments, and then we'll go to Orion, and then Ryan.
So I think I've seen some interesting takes on blockchain games. I haven't seen anything that I think is too likely to succeed yet, but with games, the failure rate is always so high that it's really not surprising. Unlike a lot of other blockchain development, games are trying, which I do appreciate. I don't know how quick we're going to see something interesting, but I do think we're going to see it. And this is one of the places that's uniquely suited to blockchain in some ways. It's just that the hit rate is low, but we'll get there.
Yeah, pretty much the same opinion as Serge. We're not there yet, but there's many places where we can go, I think.
And I also agree with those two previous statements that we're not there yet. There's a lot of people trying to crack this nut. And you have quite a few, such as myself, who think they have a way in. They think they found a crack in the armor and they're going to hammer it in and actually succeed at this. But right now, I think the biggest thing I could say to everyone watching is don't count anything that's currently out in the same category as a blockchain game for what the next generation is going to try and build, right? A lot of what is currently built is just trying to cash in on being a game on the blockchain. It's not actually a blockchain game. Most of them are just disguised Ponzi schemes. So just keep an open mind for when these games actually start appearing and give them a try when they do.
I like that the comment about disguised Ponzi schemes.
I mean, I've seen it like 5 times now.
Who said anything about disguise? Sometimes it's in the name.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're right.
All right, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you for being on this panel. We ran out of time, unfortunately. Wish we had another 15 minutes to go, but we're going to move on to the next panel, which we're going to talk about consumer-focused apps, and we're going to get the next the next participants on here now. So thank you, Serge and Ryan. And
Later, everyone.